Are you into some great tactical gameplay?
Better than ever!
With iconic Fire Emblem characters showing up?
It is quite close enough to a stretch of ground where I once stood.
Where you can offer horse manure to your allies for some odd reason? And where everyone treats you like the second coming of Jesus?
Hello, I'm the Divine Dragon. Nice to meet you.
Oh, it's the Divine Dragon! The Divine Dragon!
Then Fire Emblem Engage may be your game. The long-standing SRPG franchise from Intelligent Systems is back with its 2023 release, Fire Emblem Engage. Now this game follows up the highly successful Fire Emblem Three Houses back in 2019. With its strong gameplay, the Three Houses aspect, its great characters, and a good story. So with Fire Emblem Engage, fans expected a strong follow-up to Fire Emblem Three Houses. But as you can see from the video title, not all is well. You're reading the title and saying, well, if the stories and characters suck, is this game even worth playing? I mean, after all, two very important aspects of an SRPG are its story and characters. So we're gonna answer that question by delving into the game. And we'll start with the lackluster parts, the story and its characters, before getting to the good parts of the game. Because there is a lot to like about this game. The story starts off with the child of the Divine Dragon and game's main protagonist. 1,000 years earlier, Alir saved the world from total destruction from the evil fell dragon, Sombron. Yet our main protagonist becomes severely injured from his fight and goes into a deep slumber. Alir wakes up 1,000 years after, and since Alir has been in a slumber for so long, our main protag doesn't have any memories of the world. Alir's mother, Lumera, as well as her retainers, are shocked when Alir finally wakes up suddenly and news spreads around the rest of the world, Ilios.
Huh?
Whoa, tell me you're seeing this.
You're awake!
Huh?
You're really awake, yeah?
You're the Divine Dragon!
However, not all is well in the land of Ilios. Evil beings called the Corrupted have been randomly appearing throughout the land, signaling the return of Fell Dragon Sombron. Even worse, one nation is trying to collect the 12 emblem rings scattered throughout the world, as whoever gains all the rings have the power to rule Ilios and prevents any nation from having enough power to stop the Fell Dragon's revival. Naturally, Alir and the good guys want to prevent Team Fell Dragon from getting those rings to avoid the revival of the Fell Dragon. Thus sets up the stage for Fire Emblem Engage. So far, the narrative is simple. Bad guys want rings, good guys want to protect the rings. Fell Dragon coming back equals bad. Simple stories aren't bad at all. In fact, some of the best JRPGs have a simple, clear-cut plot. Yet in Fire Emblem Engage, its story never evolves or goes more in depth from its straightforward plot. There's no serious undertones nor impactful themes that the game explores. The plot is really good versus evil, and that's it. Thus, the story is quite predictable, as you'll see where the story is going well in advance, or during the twists, they weren't really that shocking at all. The game's story doesn't have anything that impacts the player, nor does it present anything at stake, so players will most likely not take the story seriously. The plot does try to tug at your heart at times, or try to present a serious scene, but they're so poorly done that players won't be fazed during the more pivotal moments, nor care, which is a shame, because their last game, Three Houses, had so many of those impactful moments. There's also a lot of events that defy common logic, where players will wonder, how did these characters get themselves in that situation? Or, why would these characters do that? To avoid any major spoilers, I'll be vague in my example pointing these out. During one part of the game, there's this ruler that says that their castle is impenetrable, and that they're in no danger, despite a brewing war coming to their lands. So the party goes to their next location thinking that this ruler is safe. Yet, in the very next chapter after that, that said ruler somehow got themselves captured. Their big safe castle didn't get breached or even attacked. Somehow, one person got into said impenetrable castle quite easily by asking nicely to be let in, then once inside, betrayed the kingdom's ruler and held them captive. Apparently, there were no guards around to capture this invader, nor protect the said ruler from this one assailant. There's several other examples in this game where common sense flew out the window. The game's story felt too anime. Like many of you, I'm a fan of anime, as they got some great stories. But this game's narrative became too anime, where the characters don't think rationally, or they fit common anime tropes, where the developers didn't want to take this game's story seriously, so they dove into the hardcore otaku memes. So because of this game going total anime, the story goes off the rails fast. So why did the storytelling quality tank from Three Houses to Engage? One reason is the different writing staff between the two games. For Three Houses, there were key writers that were from Koei Tecmo, where Three Houses was supposed to be the more experimental game with persona elements such as the calendar system, the gameplay loop of spending a majority of the time in the game's town, Garreg and a more serious, dark story. Whereas for Engage, the writing staff had many people that worked on Fire Emblem Fates, such as the scenario director Nami Kumuro, who worked on Fates Awakening and Paper Mario. Engage's story was more like a standard Fire Emblem game. In addition to having different writing teams from Three Houses to Engage, I also read that Intelligent System Director Tsutomu Tei wanted to simplify the story of Engage. So instead of having multiple story paths, which could be overbearing to some players, especially if players have to play all the paths to get the full story, like in Three Houses, the Engage team focused on one path instead. So it's intentional that Engage's main story is quite simple, with side activities such as the Emblem Paralogs, which are the short backstories with each emblem, and the returning iconic bonding activities, complementing the simple plot instead. Moving on to the characters, the best way to describe nearly every character in this game is that they're bland with little to no depth. Starting with our protagonist, Alir, the protag is not a bad character, as Alir is not annoying and generally likable. As with Fire Emblem Three Houses, the main protag can be male or female. Alir stands out immediately from other Fire Emblem protagonists, as he or she has unique red and blue hair and eyes. Yet there's no unique or quirky features that makes Alir stand out, other than Alir being the Divine Dragon. Alir is just there, moving the story as the main protag, while people fawn all over Alir. As stated in the intro, the characters treat Alir as the second coming of Jesus, or a huge K-pop star like BTS.
In that case, I call this meeting of the Divine Dragon Fan Club to order! Woo!
Yeah!
The Divine Dragon looks so cool drinking water! Note for the fan club, the Divine Dragon loves to drink water.
With even one ally trying to hook up with the Divine Dragon early on.
In your ear this time. Has your lunch with me today brought you any feelings of contentment?
If Engage does one thing well, the game makes the player feel like a huge celebrity or influencer, as allies will kowtow towards Alir, while the bad guys will have this deep respect for our main protagonists. With Alir's allies, it's quite hard to get attached to any of the characters. The characters fall under anime tropes where each character has one or two traits, and that's it. They have no growth or anything more to them other than their initial stereotypes. For example, you have the archer that likes working out, or the princess that loves meat so much as to make a song about it, or the mage that likes partying and cooking, or the mage girl on a wyvern that likes to be cute.
So, are you ready to concede defeat and admit that you're completely charmed?
You certainly are cute, and I'm sure you put in a lot of work for it, but I told you before that cuteness doesn't affect how I treat people. Why are you fixated on this?
I didn't want to bring it up, but okay.
Well, actually, there's several characters in the game that are obsessed with being cute, but none of these characters break out of that mold, even during the bonding moments, a staple of the Fire Emblem series, where players get to learn more about each of these characters. There's really no growth. They continue to stay within their one or two quirks, and that's it. The game didn't take advantage of these optional cutscenes to build upon these allies, other than reinforcing that, yes, they like to work out, eat meat, like to party or cook, and trying to be even cuter. The villains aren't much better, as their motivations for doing evil stuff aren't impactful. They're just there to fight the good guys over some emblem rings. Many of these villains also act straight out of an anime or manga, with them saying things like, "time to kill and to make you suffer," so nonchalantly. It's like they're from this slice of life anime. One notable villain that I could not take seriously is Marnie, who wouldn't even be a good anime villain.
Hello, it's me, your old pal Marnie. Oh, and Mavier's here too.
We meet again.
I really wish you decided to stay and fight the corrupted. Would have been so much easier. But the divine chicken's afraid of them. What? Isn't that right?
With many of the villains having bad writing, they just weren't believable at all as being evil or a hated enemy, with only one or two villains being barely passable as bad guys. It's a shame that the characters, both good and bad guys, are largely forgettable. I thought the voice acting brought out the most out of each character as the VAs tried their best to add flavor to their respective roles. If you treat this game as your typical anime, but with a bad, nonsensical story and dull characters, and expect nothing more, then the game becomes quite enjoyable. That's what I did after a few hours, and it saved me the hassle of trying to pretend that Engage's plot is anywhere near good. Throughout the game, I found myself quite engaged with the game's battles and gameplay, but not really engaged at all with its story nor characters. So with the stories and characters being quite bad, how did the game become enjoyable? Well, it's time to talk about the game's biggest strengths. Engage's gameplay and tactics are so good. The game's developers know that you're not here for the cookie cutter story or its mostly bland characters. You're here for the excellent combat and tactics, which will suck players in. Let's start with the battles. The strategy is quite addicting, as there's a variety of ways to tackle each map. Engage gives players so many tools to beat these maps, such as which weapons to buy, which weapons to upgrade, which characters to promote to advanced classes, which emblem rings to use, and which characters to bring to battle, just to name a few options. Good positioning is a staple in this game, as the game punishes players for any poor positioning with early deaths. As for the time crystal, which you can rewind time a certain number of steps, you're going to need to use this crystal to beat some of the hardest maps, as there are some truly difficult maps, especially in the game's middle to late chapters. The sword axe lance triangle, or rock paper scissors, is back, as it was missing in 3 houses, where if you match, say your rock to an enemy's scissors, you break the enemy, where you get free hits on them and they can't counterattack for the rest of the round. Characters can also wear emblem rings, which they grant iconic characters powers from the series, such as Marth, Roy, or Ike, and give those powers to the ring wearer. As mentioned earlier, the game's all about collecting these emblem rings, and with good reason. They're quite powerful and can turn around a battle fast. When your emblem attacks look as fancy as this, where you're dishing out a ton of damage into an enemy, you know that the emblem rings are the real deal. Adding to the battles, the map designs are quite solid, with key locations to hold and fight. There are some maps where you'll need to rescue villagers, then there's other maps where you'll need to take and defend a fort. Others where you have thieves that break into a castle to steal treasure, so you'll have to take out the thieves if you want to take those treasures, while others involve navigating rising water tides, and then there's a battle on actual ships in the middle of the sea. So there's a ton of variety in these battles. For players that want the ultimate challenge of taking on some of Fire Emblem's hardest battles, Engage has that in spades. The Maddening difficulty setting with Classic mode will test even the hardcore Fire Emblem veterans, where players are trying to avoid any casualties. I spent up to 3 to 6 hours each on some of the hardest battles with multiple restarts, since I was approaching the battle the wrong way, or maybe I didn't bring the right characters to the fight. The maps will have hordes of enemies in the beginning, then have reinforcements coming at you throughout the battle, making each battle intense. Every turn, I had to think, will I get counterattack, or do I have enough burst damage to one-shot a boss? Or should I pull back all my characters and play defensive? Keeping everyone alive in Classic mode is stressful, but provides immediate stakes to the player, since the threat of losing someone every turn is real. It's these kind of decisions that makes the game's Maddening difficulty so thrilling. It wasn't the only way to clear that stage. This is where Engage truly shines, where there's multiple ways to beat a map. The game makes you earn each victory on the harder difficulty levels, and I couldn't ask for more. I know that when playing on Maddening, every time I beat a map, it gave me that sense of accomplishment. It's a feeling that only a handful of SRPGs have, and Engage is definitely one of them. When you're not fighting in combat, your party will head to the Somniel, which is a big floating city where players can restock on supplies, bond with teammates, and do other slice-of-life activities such as fishing, wyvern riding, and ranching. A lot of the activities in the Somniel are about hanging out with your allies. Activities such as cooking with teammates, where they'll make some snarky comments based on how well the cook is behind the counter.
I did not know pain was a flavor.
What has the chef done? Ugh.
Picking oranges, swimming, or taking care of horses, or giving them gifts to improve your bonding levels with allies. You can even give your allies horse manure, which you'll find a lot of scattered throughout the Somniel. And while you'll get some weird responses, understandably, if you give it to someone, your bonding levels won't actually decrease. And there's even some allies that are actually cool with your smelly gif, such as Fram, since she thinks that anything from the Divine Dragon is great. There's even some funny responses depending on who you give your horse manure to. But in all honesty, I wasn't sure why horse manure is in the game, since there's no actual benefit to giving it to anyone. So I looked it up, and it's actually a joke gif, where the devs thought it would be hilarious. While the Somniel does have its fair share of things to do, it's quite a bit smaller than Garrick Mach, the home base of Three Houses. Nor was the Somniel as personable nor fleshed out as the Three Houses city. The Somniel is not a bad home base at all, but I wish it had more charm, like Garrick Mach. As for the game's aesthetics, the game does have some solid graphics, as they're a sight to see. The story scenes and characters stand out, the battlefield's clean to look at, the transitions in between have characters in your party running at the bottom of the screen, which is nice to watch during the loading screens. And the few cutscenes that are shown in the game ooze in style and show great art direction. It's especially satisfying to see enemies get destroyed using an emblem special, as shown earlier. The game's UI is also quite polished. Everything is easy to read, clearly displayed, and navigating through menus wasn't bad at all. The graphics are just all around great, as Engage boasts one of the finest aesthetically pleasing titles in the SRPG genre. In addition to granting powers in battle, the emblems play a big guest role in the game, as Alir and the characters can talk to the emblems outside of battle. They even have their own bonding moments, and there's this short minigame where you have to keep the emblems ring clean, because if you don't, those emblems get mad at you. Then there's also throwbacks to each emblem's past, as you can do optional battles with your emblems and their army to get rewards, called paralogs. For instance, the battle with Byleth shows the Tome Battleground from Fire Emblem Three Houses, complete with its battle music. The bonding moments are back, as they're a staple of the series. There's some fun interactions, where there's jokes abound, and everyday talk between characters and even emblems. These moments are a good breather when you need a break from battles. While I did enjoy the bonding moments in this game, one aspect missing from Engage that Three Houses had was pair endings, where the other characters can hook up together in the end. Engage eliminated this, but outside of these missing features, the bonding conversations are still there, with plenty of slice of life talk to enjoy. Now, the game didn't live up to Three Houses, and I think that's what most fans were expecting, since Three Houses led to a resurgence of the series, with much higher sales and a revival of the games. Yet, with Engage's narrative and characters being subpar, fans' hopes were quickly dashed. While having the 12 emblem characters are memorable and add a lot to Engage, they unfortunately couldn't make up for the iconic cast of Three Houses. No one's gonna mistake Alir with Byleth, or Three Houses' co-protagonists Claude, Dimitri, and Edelgard, or Engage's largely forgettable cast to Three Houses' popular crew, or the Somniel to Garrick Mach. I think most fans wanted the Fire Emblem series to have a more serious, in-depth story that could rival other SRPGs and JRPGs. For many of Fire Emblem stories, they were less serious and passable, but there were some standouts in the series. Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, released on the GameCube back in 2005, and Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, released on the Wii back in 2007, are known for having two of the series' best stories. Awakening was one of the series' highlights in 2013 in terms of having excellent combat, strong fleshed out characters, and great tone, but just a passable story. Three Houses was the next big highlight in 2019, where the series showed how it can have a solid, engrossing story with equally solid characters. Engage was supposed to take the next step in the series to carry Three Houses' torch to having an incredible plot, and to further put Fire Emblem on the map in mainstream gaming, rather than staying a niche game, even if Fire Emblem is a popular one among SRPGers. So rather than build upon Three Houses, Engage is a somewhat mixed bag, with admittedly more good than bad, but lacking perhaps the biggest draws to an SRPG: great stories and characters. So while Engage, overall, didn't live up to Three Houses, the game is quite fun. So going back to the question, is this game worth playing? Can great combat and tactics overcome bland characters and a bad story? In Engage's case, I think so. This game was still a blast to play, and it was worth my time. I think players will enjoy customizing characters, fighting the battles, and seeing iconic Fire Emblem heroes from past games. Engage is worth it as both a Fire Emblem fan and an SRPG fan. But I would say for newcomers or people that value story and characters, it's probably not the best entry to get into. Here's hoping that the next installment of Fire Emblem combines the tactics and combat of Engage with the story of Three Houses, Path of Radiance, or Radiant Dawns. Because if intelligent systems can combine the best of both worlds, we might be looking at another instant classic in the franchise.